Dear students, I again welcome you for the today's lecture related to the role of chemical engineer in the pressure vessel design. So this subject of chemical equipment design or the process equipment design that deals basically with the mechanical design of the chemical plants. Role of a chemical engineer is to understand the role of a mechanical design of a chemical plant, and that is why one should be well understood with the aspects of mechanical engineering and uh, that of a particular interest to our chemical engineering or chemical technologies. So when you go into the details of this, the basic topic is the designing of the vessel, or you can call the designing of a pressure vessel, which is the most important aspect of this subject of chemical equipment design. That vessel can be of a storage tank type or that can be a reactor type. All your other vessels, which are the absorption column, distillation column, separation vessels, cyclone separators, all these your chemical equipments, they are more or less supposed to be called as a vessels, and that is why we specifically talk for the vessels. Now, to whom you are going to call a pressure vessel, that is also the another consideration. That is, however, it is generally accepted that at any closed vessels, whichever is having the diameter of 150 millimeter, that means a 15 centimeter diameter, a small size, a 15 centimeter diameter, that is related to your scale size, small scale size, which are subjected to a pressure difference of more than 0.5 bars or say half a kg per centimeter square pressure, and are designed with the certain specifications. They are generally called as the vessels. This is again varies from country to country, and there is no specific definition to whom one can call the vessels. But it can be the more than 15 centimeter diameter and can be considered as the related to the more than the atmospheric pressure, that can be considered as a pressure vessels. So this subject that deals with the mechanical design of a chemical plant. Then the chemical engineers or technologists will not usually be called on to undertake the detailed mechanical design of a pressure vessel. This is my statement related to this subject. Then what a chemical engineer should do if he is not going to study the detailed mechanical design? But it's an interlink between a mechanical engineer and a chemical engineer. Chemical engineer is having more focus related to the heat transfer, mass transfer, and the reactor designing aspects. And a mechanical engineer who gives you the vessels or who gives you the units which can be used for the production of these chemical products. So one has to understand the mechanical as well as the chemical aspects also, and that is why this subject is a link between a chemical engineer and a mechanical engineer. If you want to become a successful engineer, successful production engineer, then this subject is very much essential. If you want to go into the details of the design, this subject is also very much essential. But as it incorporates the different formulas which are coming directly from the mechanical engineering or the strength of materials, The people doesn't try to go into the details of this subject. But for a production engineer and for a design engineer, this subject is very much essential because it talks of the mechanical engineering aspects as well as the chemical engineering aspects. केमिकल इंजीनियरिंग की रिक्वायरमेंट क्या है और वो मैकेनिकल इंजीनियर से कैसे लेने की है, ये सब्जेक्ट बात करता है ये. So chemical engineer and technologists will not usually be called on to undertake the detailed mechanical design of a pressure vessel, as it's a very specialized subject and will be carried out by the mechanical engineers who are conversant with the current design codes and practices and methods of stress analysis. So mechanical engineer कौन से सारे mechanical engineers are not suitable for the designing of the equipment. Those who are conversant with the current design codes and practices and the methods of the stress analysis. So these are the specialized in designers. So the role of a chemical engineer then, or the responsibility of a chemical engineer, that is to for developing and specifying the basic design information, to provide the basic design information for a particular vessel. किसके लिए चाहिए मेरे को basic design information for a particular vessel, and need to have a general appreciation of the pressure vessel design to work effectively. That is what is needed. It should work effectively. It's a responsibility of a chemical engineer that the design vessel and a fabricated vessel should give the desired percentage conversion or the desired output. It is not a responsibility of a mechanical engineer. आपका production मिल रहा है या नहीं मिल रहा है, it's none of his business. His business is to fabricate a vessel which will be mentioned or defined by you. So it is not the responsibility of a mechanical engineer, it's the responsibility of a chemical engineer only, of technologist. So this responsibility of a technologist is to that see whether that equipment works effectively or not. So developing and specifying the basic design information for a particular vessel and need to have a general appreciation of pressure vessel design which will work effectively. So this is the interlink between a mechanical engineer and a chemical operation engineer. So I suppose you have understood the basic role of a chemical engineer, chemical technologies concerned with this subject. So also the methods of fabrication one has to know. One has to know the different design procedures, codes and other constraints on pressure vessel design. Then these constraints, these limitations are limits the process conditions. Process conditions को limitations आते हैं because of certain constraints. सारी ही चीजें सारे वक्त available नहीं रहती, but if available, then at what cost? The cost factor is also going to be there. So how much cost I am going to invest it, and on what constraints I have to compromise that. That has to be decided. It's a decision-making process. So mechanical constraints can cause a significant cost threshold in the design. So all these constraints, mechanical constraints, civil constraints, then your instrumentation, electronics, you can get, but at what cost you are going to access all these facilities. There is nothing like that. You can get it, but at what cost you can get that thing? So one has to compromise depending on the cost considerations. So the what are the basic data that is required by the specialist designers? The specialist designers who designs, who fabricates our equipments. So what basic data that is needed, and this basic data, need of a basic data, which is to be provided by a chemical technologist to the mechanical engineer. तो कौन सा डाटा है कि जो इंपॉर्टेंट है केमिकल टेक्नोलॉजिस्ट को देना, स्पेशलिस्ट डिजाइनर्स को और मैकेनिकल इंजीनियर्स को? दैट इज द वेसल फंक्शनिंग, बेसिक पर्पस क्या है उस वेसल का. Then what are the process materials and services? Process material, when we talk, it is the reactants and the products. ये है process materials, and there can be the water, there can be the steam, there can be the air. So these are your utilities. These utilities help for the process materials to get processed. जो main raw materials है और main products है, they are supposed to be called as your process materials. So vessel functioning, the name of the vessel, what is its purpose, what it should serve, that is to be mentioned as a vessel functioning. Then your process materials, किसको प्रोसेस करने का है, किसको हैंडल करने का है, that should be there. So this process materials and services, then operating at the design temperature and the design pressure, what is required, that is to be provided. Based on that only he is going to select the material of construction, or you have to define the material of construction based on your experiences. Then again you have to coordinate with the cost factor and the fabrication, way of fabrication depending on this material. सारे materials का fabrication करना is not that easy, even though it can be done, but the cost, कितना पैसे दे रहा हूं मैं, साधा MS का है तो I can it can be welded at a very cheap rate. If it is a steel, then again a certain higher cost that is to be produced. But now if it goes to your specialized materials, alloys, they cannot be welded, it becomes very difficult for them to welding. So all these considerations, all these limitations, constraints, one has to discuss with the other branches of engineering. Then the vessel dimensions and orientation. What should be the vessel diameter? Is it a tall vessel having the L by D ratio very high? Length is very high as compared to the diameter, or L by D ratio that comes generally as 1:3 in case of your reactors. Then what should be its orientation, whether it's a vertically oriented or whether it's a horizontally oriented. So all these are the vessel dimensions and orientation. Then the type of the vessel heads to be used. Is it a elliptical head? Is it a polyspherical head, or is it conical head, or it's a semi-hemispherical? The different types of the heads and the different openings and connections required with that. Then the specifications of heating and cooling jackets of coils. For heating purposes, whether I am using a jacket or whether I am using the coils. So these are to be taken into account, and accordingly the fabrication has to be done. Then the type of the agitators. This is mostly talked about your reaction vessels. We are not going into the more details of the any other equipment than the reaction vessels. That is why only we are restricting here to the agitators. Then the specifications of the internal fittings. This incorporates the detailing of the other equipments. When you talk related to the distillation column, then it's a plate time distillation, or Is it if it is a plate type distillation, then what will be the dimensions of the plate? What should be the dimensions of the thickness of a plate? What are the different holes? Is it a sieve type tray or is it a ball type tray? Then how much will be the height of a downcomer? How much will be the height of a weir? Then what are how to assemble the manhole? All these specifications of internals related to the different equipments has to be taken into account. So this subject we are mostly talking related to the pressure vessels, specifically related to the reactors. Then an elementary understanding of the pressure vessel design is needed in preliminary stages of the design. Generally, most correlations for the pressure vessel cost, there are different correlations which are available for the what will be the cost of a vessel. Now, all these are based on the weight of material that is required. Now, whenever you go into the market and try to fabricate any vessel you want to fabricate, that is based on the weight of the metal that is required. समझ लो आपके घर में ग्रिल फैब्रिकेट करने का, गेट फैब्रिकेट करने का है. Then you go into the market and he talks that 80 rupees per kg I will fabricate your gate, channel gate or whatever the gate you require. So that depends on the weight of a metal required and how much cost of fabrication. That means it's welding, it's bending, giving the desired shape, all these mechanical aspects which will be involved to give you the desired shape. So that comes under this weight of metal required and its cost. So pressure vessel cost, that is generally based on how much amount of the material that is handled, weight of the vessel required, and hence require and estimate the vessel wall thickness as well as its volume. So कितना amount of the material लगेगा मेरे को vessel fabrication के लिए, vessel का material, vessel का cost इसमें involve हो रहा है. So in many cases the required wall thickness that is needed. So wall thickness, calculation of the wall thickness, which is most important consideration in this subject of chemical equipment design, and which will be determined by the combination of different loads acting on the vessel and the internal pressure required. So it is not only the depends on the internal pressure, but it also depends on the different accessories or different attachments. That is what is needed. So there is no strict definition of what constitutes a pressure vessel and how it regulates. So only one slide. It is not possible to give a complete comprehensive account of the vessel design. The design methods and data given should be sufficient for preliminary design of the constraints. But for a chemical engineer to check the feasibility of a proposed equipment design, that is the basic responsibility of a chemical technology, whether his process equipment will be feasible, will give me the desired results or not. This is the main role of a chemical technologies in the process equipment design subject. An elementary understanding of the principles of strength of material and mechanics of solid will be needed to understand his subject. So this is the basic requirement which will be needed